Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nick Lugo show. Today, I have on with me Dr. Jeffrey Huber, and I'd love to have you introduce yourself.
Well, um, not sure what you want me to say, but um, I was a diving coach for 37 years and also balanced that with uh, my academics. So I coached at Cypress Community College in Southern California for 2 or 3 years, and then at University of Nebraska, a great place. My wife and I both got our doctorates there, and both our kids were born there. So have a special place in my heart for Lincoln, Nebraska, and then we moved to Indiana, and I coached here, and then my wife is still on faculty in the School of Public Health.
Yeah, so you have an incredible resume, let's say 37 years of coaching at Indiana University. You were the Big Ten Coach of the Year for, I think it was 9 years straight, if I'm correct. And also being on the Olympic coaching team for 3 years, all in three specific Olympic years, all in diving. So just an incredible resume, and also coming to Indiana University to come and teach psychology. So the thing that really gets me, and I think this is the thing that most of the listeners are really interested in, is what creates an elite performer. Like you have been working with the best of the best your entire life, and the thing about diving is it's very mental. A lot of it really has to do with the mental component. So what is it that separates, we'll say, the wheat from the chaff, the elite from the not elite, not only in athletics but just in terms of life?
That's a great question, and I think not sure where to start on that. I know that there's a number of factors that really correlate, at least in my experience, with succeeding at the highest level, the elite level. And so I can tick off a few of them. One is
Yeah.
I thought about this recently because I'm going to give a presentation to a diving camp tomorrow, but just self-discipline. I define self-discipline as doing what you should be doing it when you should be doing it, and doing it all the time, even when nobody's looking. And that may seem pretty simplistic, but in my experience, I've seen kids who were probably not all that talented, but boy, we're willing to do everything, every day. And that's a challenge. Anybody can come in and work hard for a day or two, but to come in, day after day, and we used to do 2 practices a day, Monday through Friday, and then it's a grind. Plus, trying to be good or great in your classroom. And I think that excellence, that's another thing that I see with elites, that excellence is something that isn't just reserved for that one particular domain. That every aspect of their life, they pursue excellence. And so I think that's important as well. I had a girl who came in as a freshman, and she worked really hard. I coached her for the first 2 weeks, and she worked really hard on Monday and pretty hard on Tuesday, not so hard on Wednesday. Thursday, by the time we got to Saturday, she was just kind of a warm body. Practice, and very bright, good student. But I asked her, I said, what do you think it makes? Because I told her, I pulled her aside after 2 weeks and I said, I think you can make an Olympic team. And I said, what do you think it takes to make an Olympic team? And she goes, top 2 at the Olympic trials, which is, I go, well, not really.
Right. Yeah.
I go, not really. And she goes, what? She says, to really dive well. And I said, no. I said, here's what it's going to take. It's going to take you coming in every day and working harder than any other person, except maybe one other person in the United States. You have to outwork them. You have to be more disciplined than anybody. And what was interesting to me is that she looked at me and went, okay. And I think that's another factor that I see for reaching excellence in any domain is your willingness to accept, feedback and criticism, in a positive way, a willingness to turn inward and be introspective and honest with yourself and say, hey, I mean, right on the spot, she said, she owned up, said, that's how I've always done it, and I need to change it, and I will. And had a nice, happy ending. She wound up making an Olympic team. So
Really?
I think those are some factors that, when I was in the psychological and brain science department, which I loved. I mean, I had the opportunity to teach over 300 students a semester. I used to sit very free in my office, and a lot of times it wasn't about psychology. It was more about, trying to adapt and adjust to college life and be on my own. And, I went through that. I've had hundreds of athletes go through that, and it's tough, and if you don't get off on the right foot your freshman year in college, it can be disastrous. So I really enjoyed working with kids and sharing those sorts of things. And I'm in the process now of writing another book on, and basically just sharing those lessons that I learned as an athlete and as a coach, lessons in life, which I think are, I got into because when I retired from sport, I felt that I had gotten so much from it. And I don't mean awards and recognition, but I knew that my life would be better because of the lessons I learned, things like how to overcome fear and failure, how to overcome doubt, how to build confidence and how to work hard, right? How to be self-disciplined, how to set goals, all. So while I was going to graduate school, I coached for free at a community college, and I just didn't know that was going to be a 37-year detour into coaching. But I always wanted to be a teacher, and whether it's on the pool deck or in the classroom, I felt like that was my incentive was to teach.
Not only that, but you actually have an interesting reputation at IU, So at Indiana, one of the things that you're known for is not only the fact that you produce elite, let's say Olympians, but also just top level performers, but you take people who are not the top and bring them to the top. So for example, I would love for you to tell the story of Cassandra Cardinal, somebody who was not really looked upon very highly and has a great ending.
Yeah, that's a good question. You did your homework, and that was perfect. I mean, she is a great example because I went up to Indy to recruit this girl in high school who was really probably the top recruit in the country, and she was at the National Training Center, and she was really good. And she wouldn't give me the time of day. Wouldn't even come down for a visit. Reluctantly, they let me visit them at home, and it was kind of a humbling experience. I mean, like, well, you're here, but how long are you going to be here? We'd like to have dinner here in a bit. So I went home, and I thought, and I've never been very good at recruiting top kids, but I think part of that's because I've never been, I don't know, what's the challenge if they're already good? I like that process of building up people. I think that's what attracted me to coaching, but building them up and, taking kids. I've had kids who were broken when they came to me, and mentally and emotionally, and to see them grow and become empowered, and at the senior year to become captains, all Americans, really very gratifying for me. So I went home after that miserable experience at the home visit, and I happened to get a videotape of Sandra Cardinal, and she was okay, and she wasn't a great diver, but I don't know. I thought, well, what the heck? I'll give her a shot. So I had her come out for a visit to Bloomington, and she just kind of blew me away. I mean, she's everything I really look for as far as factors that equate with success. She's very upbeat, positive, very coachable. She's bright, very, very talented in the classroom, hardworking, all that. So long story short, before she left Bloomington, I said, hey, you're not leaving here until you tell me you're coming to IU. In fact, I'm going to scholarship you. And she really wasn't at that level at the time. but I was never, I took a lot of chances on kids, and boy, did that pay off. And I could say that about so many of our athletes on the teams that I coach. But she was just kind of the kid who, I'd say, hey, in elite level shape, you don't look like an elite athlete. It doesn't mean that she was out of shape, but I said, here's, and she went, hey, what do I need to do? And, about a year later, we take her to meet, and some of the coaches said, wow, that's what she looks great physically. But she would do that, and then I'd say, hey, let's get into sports psychology. And so she would see our sports psychologist, and he'd say, hey, write a journal. Most kids maybe would see a sports psych guy woman once or twice, but she made this a habit. And most of them, he really encouraged journals, and most of them didn't, but she would. And again, just doing it all, right? And so she never really, she didn't dive any platform when she got to IU, and she did some minimal 3-meter, but she made the Olympic team on platform, and 3 years was almost unheard of. So I give her a lot of credit, and she had a great training partner, Sarah Riley and Hildebrand, who was really tough on her. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it was, you got to get up to speed, starting late on this, you don't have years to do this. And so I think Sarah was a big part of encouraging Cassandra to get up to speed. And so yeah, I mean, she just did it all. I mean, it was never a day where she didn't come in ready, and again, that's tough to do. So when she graduated, she was a Big Ten champ, NC2A champ, USA champ, and Olympian. So great story.
Well, that's one of the things that I find to be one of the most incredible aspects of sports. I'm very into baseball, and I played baseball my whole life. And a lot of my friends who really took the baseball track, like one of my friends is playing Princeton for baseball at the moment. And one of the defining characteristics I've seen to differentiate those who succeed and those who don't succeed is those who actually, for the purpose of athletics, take classes, like read books, take classes, learn the psychology behind it. There's a facility a few about 40 minutes away from here that my friend goes to, where they make sure that all of the athletes are taking specific classes and reading specific materials so that they get the right mindset.
Absolutely. You got to, all that information has to get in there, right? And then the great ones do something with it. They really translate that into, and just my experience with talking to, Olympians for, many years, and is they just know a lot. They know a lot about themselves, what ticks, what doesn't, like I call them like emotional time bombs, things that they know that will get to them if they're competing. So they know what works and what they need to stay from. They know a lot about physics. They know a lot about physiology. They know a lot about sports psychology. So yeah, I mean, it's a full gamut. And I had a former teammate of mine when I was a diver, and he was at the Olympic trials recently, and ran into another teammate of ours, and this guy really paid me a compliment. He said, Jeff was probably the best coach at seeing the big picture, seeing everything that needs to be done to develop somebody to a level of excellence. And so that's one of the greatest compliments I think I've ever had. And so yeah, it takes a lot, and I think you have to be all in. I do in my class and in one of my textbooks, I talk about deliberate practice, which is fairly well known, and it's been researched quite a bit by Eric Anders Ericsson, and that really is probably a turning point in my coaching careers. In 1996, I read his book, The Road to Excellence, and a great book. And I'm sad to say that he's passed away, I think last year, but that really hit me over the pretty hard. And I mean, I had to take a look in the mirror at myself because basically the gist of what he was saying is it's not talent. And sure, talent's important. Not everybody can be a Usain Bolt or Albert Einstein. But he said, it's really what you do to train. And, and he called it deliberate practice. And I had to look in the mirror because I realized that I hadn't, up to that point, I'd never had a national champion. And I realized that the reason I hadn't had a national champion is because I kept telling myself, well, I just don't have the kids who are talented enough.
Yeah.
And that book just ripped that excuse to shreds. And I had to look at, I looked at all the factors that go into deliberate practice, and there's about 13 of them. And I said, as a coach personally, I'm not committed to all of those, and that changed. I mean, I was all in emotionally, all in. I was committed physically. I was teaching at the time. I stopped teaching. We started practicing way more. I was just all in, in that I can remember driving back from Indianapolis doing something. I was starting to think about the future and what we were going to accomplish. And I just had tears running down my cheeks because I was so excited and so positive that we were going to get there. And so that made a big difference because I think, first of all, I think any coach or leader, that's where it starts. What you hope to see in those that you lead, may you first see in yourself. And so I became totally committed. I became the hardest working. I said, nobody's going to spend more time and outwork me on my team. And even though I'm not doing the physical work, I said, I'm here. And I started coming in on Sundays. And so, from that, it was a turning point. And then the following year, we won the national team title. Next Olympics, I put an athlete on the team. The next Olympics, I put 2 athletes on the team. So it just started to snowball. So I think that, to answer your question, I think that how you practice is really important too, because like I told it, Amy, the girl that I said, you can be a warm body, you can be there. I mean, I've seen kids who showed up to practice and got worse because they really weren't doing anything. So you have to, and I think all of us to any endeavor bring three abilities: our physical ability, our mental ability, and our emotional ability, or our spiritual ability. And the kids that I've seen succeed, they're all in. I mean, they're not diddling their feet. They're all in. Whatever it takes, I'm willing to do that. And with that comes some caveats. I mean, like I've recognized that when you have athletes like that sometimes you have to hold them back. I mean, I've had athletes who say, go over there and do 10 of these. If you didn't stop them, they do 110 of them. And so trying to manage that. So I think I talk about that. I just talk about that in my course too, that, how to develop the emotional athlete is, really passionate, but then to make sure you take care of those folks because they can overtrain, they can be injured and all of that. So it's a matter really of, they say, don't sweat the small stuff, but I think in the small stuff therein lies greatness.
Well, I think one of the things that's really interesting is I just I had a conversation recently with another professor at Indiana University. His name is Dr. Edward Hurt, and he actually had a completely different philosophy than what you just said. One of the things that he said was, one thing that you have to take into account when you go all in, as you said, is that it requires a lot of sacrifices. Like if you're coming in on Sundays, then you're sacrificing whatever you do on your Sundays, which is most likely going to be family time, social relationships, things like that. So I wanted to ask you, for you and your athletes too, what exactly was it that, or at least do you guys have any regrets in general about going all in?
No, what do I call it? It's in other words, you're not, I mean, let's be honest, you're not going to be really great at something unless you commit to it.
Yeah.
You have to give up some Sundays, and things like that. Okay, that has to be, but there has to be, it can't be a balance. I mean, you have to, whatever you're doing, you have to be all in, but there has to be some sort of compensation for example, I went to my kids around that time, and tears run down my cheeks, and said, "Hey, if I'm not cutting it as your dad, tell me right now." I mean,
Yeah.
they said, "Hey, we want to see you more. You need to do something else." I would have gone in the next day and said, "Hey, I'm done." But they looked at me and said, "No, we love that. We like that. We know you love us and you're committed to us." And then I would do every nationals. I take both kids with me and 16 athletes. It was I'm sure I got some gray hairs doing that, but they were. It was very clear that they were my priority. And so I think you have to do those sorts of things. Very fortunate to have two great kids. I have a great marriage. I've been married for 43 years. So you have to find a way to compensate, but there's no way that you can be great. It's just not a 9 to 5 job. It's all in. I mean, I'd get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, go down and start writing down things for every athlete. So, and I think you can do it like with Cassandra Cardinale. After she graduated, she wanted to try and make another Olympic team, and but she came into my office and she was just super depressed, and and after we talked a while and I listened, I said, it just sounds like you don't have enough balance in your life, and so I recommended she go to grad school. And she did, and she found, because part of the problem was she didn't have people her age, but when she went to grad school, she started meeting people her age, and it was just something to keep her from, okay, I'm not just going home after practice and thinking about diving all day long. I've got other things to do, and I think that that's really important. And I've had kids come to me and say, I'm missing my grandma's whatever, and I go, look, we train really hard. If you can't take a week off and go see your family and your grandmother at the lake house that you guys always go to, we're doing something wrong. So
Yeah.
I've always I feel that that's important. And again, it can never be a balance, but there has to be something there to ground you. And I had a girl who, she's fantastic, and grew up in Bloomington. One time I went to her, I said, why don't you do summer abroad class and take, I think she was a history major, and she went over to Florence, and studied for a summer. Came back and still went to nationals and had a great nationals. So I think that's important. Find that, somewhat of a balanced imbalance.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's something that's super interesting. One of the problems that most coaches have is that they struggle with getting their people motivated. Like I was on a high school varsity basketball team, and on the high school varsity basketball team, we had the opposite problem. Our struggle was how can we get people motivated when we had multiple people quit on the team, kids wouldn't really try that hard in practice. That was really the problem. And I think that's more of a universal problem. So how did you actually get to the problem of going too far? What was the thing that you did that allowed you to motivate your people to go beyond where they would have gone otherwise?
Well, I think some of that's self-driven. I mean, there's some kids. I've had a number of kids where I said, "Hey, I think you make an Olympic team." They go, "Meh," So, but I think that, and first of all, it's a great question because it's something that's faced youth participants in sports, all the United States concerned about that, because that's the future of those year-olds that are out there doing whatever sport. Someday they might, 1 or 2% of them might become, great Olympic athletes. But the reason for that drop in participation is honestly poor coaching. I mean, I think we've all seen videotape of parents getting in a fight, and coaches getting in a fight after a Pee-wee football. That decline is poor coaching and overzealous parents. And so I tried to address both of those. I had rules for parents and would talk about how they can support their child in the right way. And then I just I did a lot of things to try and motivate them. And I won't go into all of it because I can spend about 3 or 4 chapters in my textbook on how to do that. But one of them is just I talk about respondent conditioning, where just presenting a lot of really positive stimuli that people enjoy, and it's a visceral physiological reaction, right? Like, I really love this. Like,
Yep.
I dove in a program when I was little, and it was horrible. I mean, I had a coach throw a chair at me, pre Bobby Knight. But so I quit. But then that program, some years later, my freshman year in high school, a coach came, and he just made it fun. I mean, we would do silly stuff. And he took a program with about 10 kids, and I think 4 years later, after my senior year, he moved on. He had over 100 kids.
Wow.
And he coached them all. And we would show up like an hour before practice, and he'd have to kick us out of practice because we wanted it so much. So I think I know that there's a lot we can do to motivate kids, particularly young kids. But it never gets different. Like there's deliberate practice, but there's also a concept called deliberate play, right? Where you just let them play. And that was always us. It gets smaller and smaller, but it was always a part of my practices. So there's a ton of stuff you can do. And I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of things that coaches do that they're unconscious of, that they're using it in a negative way, right? Because we can teach people to hate something just as much as we can teach them to love it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that was kind of the case with your team. But,
Yeah.
Kids, especially publicly in front of their peers and things like that. So I really, when I retired from teaching, I retired so I could take a position with USA Diving and Director of Education. And I started an online university called USA Diving Learning Academy. And some of the first courses on there were, one was quality coaching, required course. Like, if you want to coach, here's some things you need to know. It had nothing to do with the sport. It had everything to do with just working with young people. And then I put in 2 or 3 courses for parents too. Here's, you want to help your kid. Thing you can do of watching you practice.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is the most underrated parts of athletics in general, I think performance in general, is mind state. Let's say the mind state in which you go into a specific event. So for example, especially with diving, I assume, but I've run into the same problem with basketball and baseball. It's like, let's say I'm going into the event and I'm in the wrong mind state. I'm fearful, I'm nervous, I'm shocked, I'm just not in that good state that I desire to be. I'm not going to perform nearly as well. And a lot of coaching, a lot of the goal of coaching is to get people into maybe a flow state, maybe an aggressive state, maybe a combination of the two, maybe I'm not sure if you know that much about basketball, but Kobe Bryant was known for his Mamba mentality, where he would just go full beast mode, right? That's sort of the idea. And well, I just wonder, so as a diver, I think diving in basketball is a little bit different in terms of diving. You need a little bit more calm, serene, and control than basketball. So I'm wondering, what kind of mood state are you trying to get your divers into during practice and during the meets?
Yeah, I do. I wrote a whole chapter on emotion. Like some of the work that a guy named has done with emotion in sport. And basically what he developed was called the eyes off model, individuals on optimal functioning. And what it mainly says that there are emotions and ranges of emotions that are most optimal for individuals. So it's different. I tell the story. I had a girl come out of my camp. She wasn't very good, but I just loved working with her. She's so coachable. And so she walked on, and tough as nails. She get up on platform, and it really you gotta be tough to, or something, right? To jump off a 3-story building, and everybody thinks that water's pretty soft. You hit that water. I mean, I've landed one time. I thought I hit a piece of concrete in the water,
Wow.
but she was tough. But she'd get in the meet and she would not perform well. And so I went over to one of my divers and I said, "Hey, I just want you guys to know, I'm not mad at Lori. I love her. She's awesome, but I'm gonna jack her up a little bit here, you know." So I went over there and she's a goddamn, one person. I got really up in her face and I said, "Listen, I'm tired of this blah, blah, blah. You get up there and you blah, 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 and do it now." And then I turned around and I looked at the athletes and my mouth kind of like, well, I hope that helps. And so she got up in the meet. She got up in the meet and dove great. And after the meet, I said, "Hey, Lori, I'm sorry." She goes, "No, I needed that. I needed that." Well, fast forward maybe four years later, I had another diver, same thing, tough as nails. I mean, I've coached some incredible women, and incredible men too. But so anyway, long story short, I tried that same approach with her, and it was a total disaster. It did not work.
Really?
But we found out, and I tried these things during the season for the smaller meets. So my goal is to maybe lose the battle but win the war, the championship.
Yeah.
So it didn't work for her, but we found out what did work for her. So my point is that there are different emotions and different ranges of emotions that work well. I had a guy, his brother's Andy Roddick, the tennis player. I don't know if you know him. He won the U.S. Open.
Wow.
But anyway, his brother Lawrence, before a meet, would look over there and he'd be all mad and great. And this happened a couple of meets in the first year I was coaching. And finally went over and I said, "Well, Lawrence, what are you pissed off about? Why are you mad?" And he goes, I find when I get angry, it helps me compete." Yep. I go, "Oh, wow. Okay." So, everybody's different. I had another guy who his anger would escalate into rage and fury. And when that happened, bye-bye. He needed to take himself out. But he also took, so we worked on it. And I think that this is, the longer I coached, the more I got into sports psychology and really what you were talking about, like, what is the mindset you want that's going to work for you when you head in there? And he told me some years later, he said, it took me a couple of years of working with you to find that place. And he called it that place that I can go to where I know now I'm ready.
Yeah.
Before I go to competitive business meeting, I already know I am because of what I learned. So I get to that place and I'm ready to perform. So that's a great observation I think you made. And I think a lot of coaches don't see,
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing I would definitely want to expand on that idea. I mean, it's so interesting because what it really happens is you have to deal with things like focus. Focus is one of the most difficult problems that every athlete has to deal with. Attention, focus. I play basketball and it's weird. It's weird that in basketball, I will take a jump shot from the same point. Let's call it a free throw. Right. And the thing about a free throw is it's the same free throw every time. In bowling, you do the same bowling every time. I play cornhole with my family, all the time. And in cornhole, it's the same throw every time. And in diving, it's the same dive every time. Yet there's so much individual variability between how I do one day versus how I do the next day, whether I make the shot, whether I miss the shot, and how focused I am. The thing that I've been able to derive in my own life is it's all about how focused I am. If I'm focused on making that free throw, then I'm going to make the free throw 9 times out of 10. But if I'm not focused, then I'm just going to kind of throw it somewhere in the general direction of the basket and maybe it goes in, but most likely it's luck. So how do you cultivate that focus, that we'll say mindset of focus within your divers?
Well, it all starts in practice first, right? I mean, if you can't do it in practice, don't expect to do it in competition. I don't care what it is. If you can't hit your free throws in practice, why do you expect to hit them? And I think that's a good starting point for a lot of athletes, because I had kids come out of finish a meet and they go, "Boy, I really performed poorly today."
Yeah.
I said, "Really?" "Well, I said, just being honest, but I didn't see you do anything in the meet that I don't see you do every day in practice." What? I said, what do you think? You can do it poorly in practice? And And that, I mean, I can tell you as an athlete, that totally changed one day I came in, had a great practice. I go, man, I'm ready for nationals. The next day I came in, had a totally crappy practice. And I go, well, wait a minute. Who's going to show up at nationals?
Yeah.
The guy yesterday or the guy today? And I said, the only way I can assure myself that, the day before a guy will show up is that I don't have any bad days. And that, you talk about focus. That's, that changed everything. I got up there and every dive was like critical, it was important. This is a meter, focus. And I think that sort of focus becomes a habit. And so does, being, unfocused, I think, so I think it starts at practice because you can't have one without the other. But having said that, I'm sure of guys who can hit a lot of good free throws in practice, but okay, now when the meet rolls around, so and then I in that case, we do a lot of preparation, like scenario practices,
Visualization.
I have like 5 pillars of mental training that I really over the years more and more started emphasizing from day one, and saying, look, mental skills are just like physical skills. They don't get good without you practicing them, right? And you can't rely on them, you can't draw on them if you're not doing it every day in practice, right? And outside of practice too. Like Greg Louganis, Olympic gold medalist, used to tell me that he visualized everything hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times a day, over and over again, and not just doing things perfectly, because we don't always, he told me, he said, if you have a perfect takeoff, it's pretty easy to hit a dive, but the great ones can hit the dive with an imperfect takeoff. So he would visualize, being over the end of the board or being back, being too close, being too far out. He visualized every scenario, so that what happens is when you're in that situation, you've been there so many times that you already know how to react. So we do a lot of visualization. I'm a huge proponent of self-talk. We listen to a lot of voices throughout the day, but the most powerful indeed is that small voice in our head. That's, I've had some real success with kids who were negative. I had this one girl come in her freshman year, and she'd do it. Whoa, and this would go on, and it would devolve. It would get worse and worse and worse until she was an emotional wreck, just for all intents and purposes over. So, and great person, great athlete, and she wound up going on to have a lot of success. But and I said, it's okay. Dive sucked. It's not okay to say that you sucked. And furthermore, saying the dive sucked doesn't tell you what to do on the next one. So, I went home and had her develop a whole list of phrases that she could use that were positive, that were directing her, because that's what you want self-talk to do, right? To enhance your emotions and your feeling of optimism, and you want it to direct your focus and tell you what to focus on, So I said, you could come up and say, hey, that dive sucked, but on the next one, I'm going to do this and it's going to be much better.
Yeah.
And I said, try that. And that really made a huge difference. First of all, we started getting through practice without her breaking down, emotionally. And man, I'll never, it came down to the national championship team title. And she was with Cassandra Cardinal as a synchro partner.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to hit their back 2.5s in order to move up high enough. Otherwise, we do not win this team championship. And I went over to her and I said, hey, why don't you do this, this, and this? And I didn't say like, hey, you got to do this to win, but just make sure, go out there and perform. Do the things that you can do. She went out and it was her worst dive. She just nailed the hell out of that. And we won the national team title, team championship. So I just give her a lot of credit. And she's done great. She went on and is a optometrist now. So,
Wow.
you know,
That story actually gave me chills, just so you know.
thanks.
I felt it like run down my spine. But one thing that I did want to ask was, especially I find this really important, is what do you feel, or how do you feel about rituals? So a ritual before a dive, a ritual before a game, what is your philosophy behind that? And definitely expand.
Oh yeah, they're huge. And there were two is pre-performance routines, and there's also pre-competition routines. So pre-competition is what you're doing leading up. It could be the day before, 2 days before, the day of. But the pre-performance is what you do right before you perform.
Yeah.
And I think it's huge. And, I really had my divers outline a very specific pre-performance routine, because a lot of them would do it, but they wouldn't be conscious of it. They wouldn't understand the importance. And so we started to I started them to become really conscious of that, because we talked about that place you go to perform. That's part of how you get there, is that pre-performance routine. So I think they're really, really important. And I don't care if it's a business meeting or baseball or whatever. We teach that. And,
So what are the tenets of a good routine? I know there's definitely some general guidelines that you would give.
Well, I think it depends on the sport, and the demands of the sport. I mean, for diving, it was, for example, I had Christina Lucas, who was really had a nice pre-performance routine, and went on to make 2 Olympic teams. And
wow.
For her, she wouldn't watch the competition, usually just kind of be in a corner. She had on headphones, particular type of music, and I would have athletes really throughout the year find music that helps them kind of get to that place they want to be. Some people like upbeat, and some people want calming. So there's a variation among the individuals. So and then we just had a routine where she would come over. I would usually give her 1 or 2 points, keep it very simple. Then she would go over, and then she would visualize the dive and rehearse the dive, and rehearse it maybe like 6 or 7 times, because there might be like a 15-20 minute gap between rounds of dives. So and then she would rehearse that, and then she climbed the ladder, throw her chamois down, and then she would do a little bit of self-talk, and then a little bit of what I call energy management. So it was always fun for me, because the last thing she would do right before she'd take her approach was she'd just give a little breath out. And as soon as I saw that, I always thought, here we go. So I think those are really important. And I like Ken Revisa, I can't remember. He does a thing, he's a sports psychologist who works with baseball players, and he's got a thing for pitchers. It was at the seven R's. And I think that's really helpful too. So what it is kind of a pre-performance routine. That, let's say you're a pitcher and you throw a pitch and it gets knocked out of the ballpark. Well, you got 2 choices. One, you can fold up the tent, pack it in, and go home, or you can recover and back for your next pitch, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more pitches, and I think that's true for anybody, whether it's a golfer, it's a bad tee shot or something. You have to recover from that.
Yeah.
And those athletes who do, I think those are the resilient ones. That, they can weather the storm. So he did a nice thing where he's like, he recognizes the situation, take work, because like in diving, if you miss a dive, I mean, I can tell you as a diver, it's like, damn it, I knew I could do that dive better. Why did I miss that? And so it would be real easy for me to be thinking about the last dive and have it roll over and affect the next dive, right? And so we got to be able. And so I think that's a perspective that's important to coach.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we really, really learn in basketball and baseball too. It's a really, really important tenet of just the fact that, all right, especially, you know, in baseball, right? In baseball, you fail so many times. You are expected to fail 70% of the time
Yeah,
and not get a hit. It's like, how miserable is that? And you would be like,
you'd still
I
be
don't,
good if you're if you're batting 300, you still look good.
yeah, exactly. Like, you're amazing if you fail 70% of the time. So it's incredible to see how somebody will take that failure and make an error on the field or have it affect their next at bat, you know. And one of the biggest problems that baseball players struggle with, and the same thing goes with basketball. If you watch James Harden in the playoffs just now, he was struggling with the same thing, something like the yips, something like a slump. You know, these things are completely psychological, yet baseball players still haven't figured out how to avoid them. And
Yeah,
and it's incredible to see how the psychology plays out in those people. One of the things that I really
yeah.
wanted to
I just
ask, yeah, sure, go.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, no, one of the things I really wanted to ask you is to see how have you seen this play out, and how has your research been able to prove that these same psychological concepts actually play out in academics too. So the same problem of going on a slump, how could that actually translate to an academic slump?
Well, first of all, um, Goldberg, I can't remember his first name. Dr. Goldberg's written a couple books on, one of them is called Slump Busting. And he's really done some good work with that. So the first thing you want to do is make sure it's not a technical issue. So like if you're talking about sports, it's like, well, maybe you're in a slump because you really need to make some corrections. And in academics, it might be, well, you're really not studying the right way, right? Or you're
Yeah,
reading the book, but you're not, you got to condense it and look, understand the key concepts. So you have to make sure it's that's out of the way. And like I had a problem with Cassandra Cardinal. She was doing what's called an inward 3.5, where you stand on the end of the tower facing the back of the tower, and you throw into the tower. And she didn't tell me that she had gotten lost. She went to a meet in China, and I with her. She got lost and smacked in the water. And then it happened one other time in warm up, and she came home, never told me that. But then she let it build up, and I got to the point where if I said 403C, which is inward 3.5 tuck, she would start to cry. And so
wow.
we really had to regress. And I use responsive conditioning and try to recondition her. But the first thing we found was that there was a technical issue. She wasn't seeing the water, and we had to resolve that. But then we had to go back, and we had to, it's called desensitization, trying to, we would start simple with her standing just simply on the 1 meter platform backwards, because she wouldn't even do that.
Wow.
And it took about 6 months, but we got her back. But I think a lot of it, if it's not a technical issue, like you're studying at home and you're doing the right sorts of things, and then you show up for an exam, you blank, now we've got some other, that's where I would invoke the mental skills,
Yeah.
training to get them around that. And every problem has a solution. I mean, but the solution, sometimes students and athletes make the mistake that the solution is, well, if I don't think about it, I'll be fine. I'll get over it. Well, maybe not, right? I mean, I've had athletes that say, well, I know it's a big meet, it's Olympic trials, but I'll be okay. It's like, hell no, you're not going to be okay. It's probably one of I think it's more stressful. I've had a lot of Olympians tell me it's more stressful than the Olympic Games.
Wow.
But I said, you have to know in advance that you are going to be nervous. Prepare for that, right? So if it's an exam, I used to tell students, okay, prepare now, and then we'd sit down and listing out all the things you can do to help prepare yourself mentally for that performance, which I think, taking an exam is a performance, right? And you got to have that focus. You got to be, if your anxiety level goes up, it's not just your heart racing, right? It's your mind that can race. And I've had kids tell me, like, hey, looked at the test and just drew a blank. So there's a lot you can do, and I'm not sure I want to go into all of that, but I think that the key is to recognize it and not to carry it with you. I mean, if you had a bad exam and you had another one, do something about it. Don't just sit there and wallow in your own self-pity and expect things to change on their own. I think one of the most important things that I liked about coaching was empowering people, getting them to believe that they control the situation. The things that they can control, they can control.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things that I actually noticed in, I was talking to Dr. Edward Hurd about this, is he said that there's this, he essentially not discovered, but he did a lot of research into this idea called self-handicapping, and the fact that some people will be so afraid of failure. Some people will be so afraid, like Cassandra in those 6 months, I'd assume, that the mindset is, well, I might as well just not try, right? Because if I try, then I'm going to have to go through this whole rejection period of, well, I tried as hard as I possibly could and failed, right? Like, that's a pretty miserable mental state to be in. But some people, they self-handicap, they go through this we'll say backwards mental process and say, well, then I might as well not try. If I don't try, then I don't fail. And then I could always look back on the future and say, well, look back on the past and say, well, maybe it was someone else's fault, or maybe, you know what, I just never tried. So it's really not, I really never failed. So did you experience a lot of that?
I mean, I think what he's talking about is maybe attribute theory, where you're attributing your successes and failures to either external or internal. And
that's a big part of it. Yeah,
I've seen that. I think first of all, it's important that athletes understand that who they are as a human being and their self-worth is not tied to how they finish in a competition. And I know I struggled with that as an athlete, and I had a lot of athletes. And and to try to put that aside and say, it isn't about you as a person. It's just about, how good can you be? What is it you want to be? I mean, for a lot of athletes, I sit down and we will start the season with goal setting. And let's say they say, well, I want to be a Big Ten champion. We never talk about that again. What we talk about are all the things that they have to do and can control in order to become. And so it's never about Big Ten champion. It's just about the doing, about getting immersed in that and doing. And so I think at the end of the day, when it comes down to the end of the season, they recognize, hey, I've done everything. I couldn't have done any more. I let the hay's in the barn. Now I'm just going to go out there, use my mental skills, focus, and let the chips fall where they may. And I used to tell them, I said, if the wheels are going to fall off, let it be all four. But go out there. It's your party. Take your dance. You've earned it. Go out there, be aggressive, do your thing. And wherever you fall, fine. Who cares? Because all you want to do is look back and say, I gave my best effort, right? Because that's the Olympic creed. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about giving your best effort. It's not about who you are as a person. I think framing that and parents at an early age can have a negative impact on kids about that. Like, well, you got to beat so and so, or hey, if you win, I'll give you $5 or whatever. But it's got to be more about just personal best and enjoying the process too. My God, I tell my athletes, how do you dive out there without having your hands around your neck? If you think that every performance is all about you and how people are going to perceive you and how you're going to perceive yourself and your self-worth. So I think that has to get straightened out. And I know as an athlete, I went home after a miserable nationals and asked myself, why am I diving?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm diving because I want to go out there and just show in the heat of the battle my best performances, and I got kind of, I don't know what happened is I went to a national, the best shape of my life, and not miss, right? And that happened. I didn't miss a dive, but I also didn't hit a single dive. It was the most unsatisfying experience of my athletic career. And so I went home and it's like, never again. It's not about that. It's about going out and do my best. And I don't care if I F up on something, as long as I'm going after it. So
Yeah, that's
so
one of the that's one of the things that I think we miss about athletic achievement, especially, is that most of the part of athletics that makes it really interesting is the psychological aspect of it. Like I was watching, there's a crazy interesting phenomenon in basketball. I don't know how much you've been keeping up with the playoffs recently, but so interesting in the fact that for whatever reason, the Nets were the number one team in the league. They were the best. Everybody thought they were going to win the whole thing. And the Knicks were just a 4 seed that were coming in. The Nets were number essentially one, but they were number two. And the Knicks were a 4 seed. And they sold tickets for the Nets and the Knicks game. And everybody went to the Knicks game and nobody wanted to go to the Nets game for whatever reason. And the reason is because, well, the Knicks were more exciting. The Knicks overcame such a tremendous obstacle of not as good of players, the idea of Miracle on Ice, right? Like not as good of player, Rudy too, not as good of players, they didn't really come off they were the underdogs. They had all of these things that really were going on for them.
mm-hmm.
And they were the more interesting story. There was also the game 7 of the Nets playing against the Bucks the other day. It really wasn't a battle of athletic achievement. It wasn't who was going to score the most points. Everyone was just interested in Kevin Durant and Giannis Antetokounmpo. They were saying,
Yeah.
how far can they go? How many points can they score? How far is their limit? They played the entire game. They played 48 minutes straight, which nobody ever does, and then went into overtime and played the whole thing, which is the entire game. And the question is, who's going to win the battle, right? Like who's the one who has the most mental fortitude to go on. And I think that's one of the most impressive things about diving too, in that, you look at someone like Cassandra and you say, okay, great, she was Olympian, but you look at her story, you look at her limitations and how she was able to overcome that. And that's the thing that makes it so incredible.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did see that was it the Bucks beat the Nets? Or
Kevin Durant got beat.
Game 7.
Yeah.
That was a hell of it.
Yeah, I know.
That was a battle of wills. I honestly think that.
Well, that was the thing, actually. If you want to get into psychology, this absolutely blew me away. So you have Kevin Durant. He played 48 minutes. It's 12 quarters of 12-minute quarters, 4 minutes. So we literally played the entire game, 48 minutes going into it. And he made the game-winning shot to send it into overtime. So the game-tying shot to send it into overtime. And he scored, I think it was like 50 points. It was absolutely incredible. But what happened was he worked so hard in that in the end of the regulation period that by the time overtime came, he took a break, he took a rest, and I think he believed that it was going to be it. Like he was going to end after 48 minutes, and he was putting all of his juices in that. By the time it came to overtime, he had nothing left in him. Zero. And I don't even think it was a physical thing, because 5 minutes ago, when there were 47 minutes left on the clock, he was doing completely fine. But once you get into the overtime period, the point where, he didn't really expect for that to happen, for overtime to come, he completely broke down and he airballed the 3 to lose the game.
Yeah, the one that sent him into overtime was if he'd have been just a little bit further back, it would have been a 3-pointer, not a 2-pointer, and they would have won the game. So,
and they would have won the game.
Yeah, I will tell you, I don't miss. I've been on both sides. I've been on the heartbreak side, and I've been on the victorious side, and it's harder to forget the heartbreaks. I mean, it's just one year we lost a Big Ten, 3 different athletes, the Big Ten championship, and NCAA, and the U.S. National Championship. We lost all 3 of those by a total of 6 points, which in diving is like half a point more from one judge on one dive in each of those.
Wow.
And it was a tough pill to swallow, but we came back. But yeah,
It sticks with you.
I don't
Yeah.
miss that at all. Yeah, I mean, the hardest thing I think is to go in the locker room after a game like that and find the right words to say to your team. You know,
As a
Kevin Durant,
coach.
from what I did read about it, I mean, he had a hell of a game. I mean,
Incredible.
so, but yeah, but you
Well,
know that
that's
going in, you take your chances. You know, you can lose, but that's part
well,
of the game.
well, that's one of the things that we were talking about before, and I think that's a crazy difficult thing to worry about. Is like Kevin Durant, you know, your team, you guys put your all into it, right? This is not one of those where you didn't try as hard as you could, or you know, there was some effort problem or whatever. It was both teams reached their individual potential. Both teams went as high as they could possibly go. They did their best, and it still wasn't enough. And I think that I agree. That seems like well, I've experienced something like that. It's like that's the thing that's probably the most heartbreaking.
Yeah, I think what's more heartbreaking though is if you look back and you said, I should have worked harder. You know, I should have been more aggressive. Blah blah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's all I ever asked my athletes. I said, I don't care where you finish. I just want you to be able to look back and and say, you know, I left it all there. You know, I did everything I could. You know,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah,
that's it.
there's a great quote by a famous motivational speaker named Jim Rohn, and he said discipline, you will feel one of two pains in life, discipline and regret. The only difference is that discipline weighs ounces while regret weighs tons. I think
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think I think what you did with your entire career is something that's so incredible. You were able to overcome some of the things that Americans in general are struggling so much today on the idea of discipline, the idea of becoming elites, and the idea of, well, getting up off the couch, right, and doing these things, and actually bring people to the opposite problem of working too hard. I I commend you, and well, thank you for coming on. This is an absolutely incredible podcast.
Well, thank you, Nick. You did a great job and some great questions. I really enjoyed it, and thanks for asking me to join your podcast.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Okay.
All right, you take care.